They locked the front door at closing and slid the deadbolt with a practiced thumb. The yogurt machines powered down. One girl counted the drawer, another stacked paper cups, a younger sister sat with her backpack at her feet, and a seventh grader traced a finger through condensation on the glass. Neon from the strip center washed the counters pink. It was the kind of night teenagers earn by being responsible, finish the shift, wait for a ride, talk about school and weekend plans. A door at the back didn't sit flush. The alley was dark, except for a single streetlight. In the last minutes before everything went wrong, the girls moved the way people do when they've closed a place 100 times, wipe counters, twist the mop, joke about who gets the last swirl of soft serve. A camera wasn't pointed at the right spot. An alarm didn't cover one door. Before dawn, a column of smoke rose from the row of shops. Firefighters forced the door and met a wave of heat and the chemical bite of melting plastic. They knocked down flames that had rolled across the ceiling and dropped onto the counters. Steam rose and fell. Under a collapsed section of the front counter, they found the first body, then another, then two more. All four were girls. They had been bound. They had been shot. The fire had been set to hide what happened. The names spread with the sun. Jennifer Harbison, her sister Sarah, Eliza Thomas, Amy Ayers, the youngest. Parents pressed to the tape line and were turned back by uniforms with careful hands. The shop's owner stood in the cold with his head in both palms. The city learned the news together. Neighbors, classmates, coaches, cashiers from the grocery a few doors down. A place where families bought desserts had become a crime scene no one could make sense of. Once the last hotspots were out, detectives stepped inside. They moved slow so their footsteps wouldn't grind away what little the fire had left. Photographers worked from the door inward, framing soot-dark walls and a register drawer yanked open. Shell casings were collected. Melting had erased most prints. The safe showed fresh pry marks. Nylon cord fused to flooring was cut out in a square. A payphone just outside became a point of interest. In the beginning, every object might matter. The first theory matched the mess, a robbery that turned into something worse. Detectives canvassed the shopping center, the gas station across the street, and the apartments behind the alley. They wrote down plates, knocked on doors, and listened to the details you only notice after the fact. A couple argued near a parked car. Two young men lingered by the windows too late. A truck pulled in, idled, and pulled back out. Tips filled a wall. Most went nowhere. A few kept returning. Forensics crept forward. Heat had scoured fingerprints and smeared shoe prints into black puddles. The medical examiner confirmed what the scene suggested. The girls were shot in the head, their bodies arranged and burned. A small biological sample survived in a place the flames hadn't reached. At the time, lab work could tell sex, but not much more. Detectives saved everything they could for the day science might catch up. The families entered a rhythm of meetings they had never imagined. Briefings at the station, visits to the site when the tape came down, interviews when they felt strong enough to speak. Friends held vigils in a gym and passed candles hand to hand. A reward was announced. The file thickened. The girls were buried. Nothing stopped hurting. Leads pulled the unit toward a group of young men who ran in the same circles and had a reputation for trouble. One was picked up with a handgun and talked. He gave pieces that sounded close. Interrogations stretched late into the night. In taped interviews, two suspects described a break-in that spiraled. The statements were messy, details shifted, but they placed people in the shop and described the awful end. Prosecutors filed charges. Trials leaned hard on those interviews. There wasn't much physical evidence. The fire and time had stolen it. Juries listened to detectives who had lived with the case and to witnesses who recalled words said in confidence when everyone was younger and reckless. One defendant was convicted and sent away. Then another. The families sat through every hearing, measuring out hope one setting at a time. Appeals forced the state to defend the interviews themselves. Lawyers argued the suspects were worn down, that they repeated details they thought investigators wanted, and that one man's confession couldn't be used against another who wasn't there to challenge it. While that moved upward, the evidence moved sideways to a lab with improved DNA methods. From the saved sample, analysts drew a partial male profile that didn't match the men the state had sent to prison. Courts reversed the convictions. One man stepped into the sun and hugged a mother who had kept a place at the table. Another passed a wall of cameras and stared at the ground. The district attorney announced an intent to try again. Then a Y chromosome profile from evidence tied to the scene again failed to match any of the four. Prosecutors dismissed the charges, saying they wouldn't proceed until the science could shoulder the weight a jury needs. Detectives didn't stop. They re-interviewed witnesses whose lives had moved on. They followed DNA hits that popped up and then fell away. They studied similar crimes, robberies that ended in fire, crews who staged chaos, drifters who left town after the kind of night that becomes legend. They went to prisons to hear men who claimed knowledge and later admitted they were chasing attention. Each promising lead dissolved at the lab bench or in the timeline. Through it all, the families kept the girls present. Jennifer's friends called her a leader. Sarah was bright and quick with a joke. Eliza loved animals and wanted to be a veterinarian. Amy was the youngest, with a grin that opened doors. The details mattered because they anchored why anyone kept going. The families started foundations, worked with schools, and asked the same public that had helped once to help again. The strip mall changed tenants, but people still slowed when they drove past. Every few years, new tools arrive. Labs promise they can pull more from less. Detectives send swabs and wait. A task force forms, then thins. The case climbs back into the news, drawing tips from people who were kids when it happened and have since carried a scrap of memory they weren't sure mattered. Sometimes the tip is real. Sometimes it's a ghost. The unit treats each one like it could be the last piece. Some facts are immovable. 4 girls were inside a small yogurt shop at closing. Someone, or more than one, came in after the doors were locked. They tied the girls, shot them, and tried to burn the evidence of everything else. That person walked out and left the city with a wound that never quite healed. Somewhere, someone knows the sound the door made when it shut. Someone smelled smoke on a jacket later, or heard laughter trying too hard to sound normal. Secrets like that do not stay light forever. The file exists in paper and pixels. It travels with the detective who owns it now, on a cart to conference rooms, and on a flash drive in a pocket. When he meets with the families, he promises only what he can. The next test will be run. The next interview will happen. The next tip will be treated like it could be the one. He keeps their names in the center. The yogurt shop murders are unsolved. The case waits for the person who can no longer carry what they know, or for a piece of science that can speak for those who can't. In the city where this happened, people still tell their kids about the 4 friends who never came home, not to scare them, but to insist that somebody remembers. Thank you for listening to The Lantern's Tale. Subscribe for more true stories if you dare.